Xunzi, the Chinese philosopher. Okay, so in the beginning, obviously, we had Yao, who invented the calendar. Um, you know, and from then after, we had kind of a mythological view of the universe. And we had concepts like Jian, which means heaven, and the Tao, which means the way. So basically, Shunzi's philosophy is about ritual and its importance. And the Shunzi, at the end of the Shunzi, is a title given to Chinese noble people, rulers, and philosophers in particular. I think so. Obviously, most of the Chinese philosophers have that kind of moniker. Okay, so the Tao, this was the very beginning of the ontology of Chinese belief. The Tao, which means the way. The way one should live. So it's moralization, really, and ritual, and it binds the two together. Um, so Shunzi basically came after the death of Aristotle, but Confucius kind of came before Socrates. And we had guys like Xunzi and kind of Mencius and a few others who kind of were Confucianists. They defended Confucius. Um, and there's a big kind of contradiction between, or an argument or opposition between Xunzi and Mencius. Mencius believed that humans were naturally evil, or not naturally good, and Shunzi believed that they were evil. Basically, humans are naturally evil, and that kind of so Shunzi was a kind of a Hobbesian. He believed that culture is a kind of a technology, or is comprised of technology such as the family, ritual, and religion, which help kind of contort people into something that's unnatural. This concept of good. And related to this idea is the idea of ritual. So the Tao was in the beginning. In the beginning was Tao. So there we have Confucius, Mencius, and Xunzi. Okay, so the a quote from Xunzi is, "Heaven's ways are constant." So heaven exists in and for itself, outside the register or realm of human experience, and it just kind of continues omnipresently, or in and for itself. Um, it says it does. The full quote is, "Heaven's ways are constant. It does not prevail because of a sage like Yao. It does not cease to prevail because of a tyrant like Zhib." Okay, so no matter what tyrants do, no matter what kind of or type of benevolence or sages are out there, heaven's ways are going to be impervious to this. So it's like K Sarah Sarah. Like, you know um order and disorder operate outside the operant of human concepts of time and space, human reality. So kind of there is a kind of a fate or divinity or providence which kind of is outside our control. And okay, so there's some just thoughts on Shunzi and Mencius and their opposition to Confucianism. Confucius said that men are close to one another by nature. They drift apart through behavior that is constantly repeated. So he kind of put the emphasis on ritual, and Xunzi took it up and conflicted with this guy Mencius, and kind of believed that man was inherently evil, um, but that he needed ritual to kind of to formulate himself and his character. Um, Obviously, we have kind of ideas like the Mayans and the Aztecs, who kind of associate the doctrinal with human sacrifice. So this conflicts with Xunzi, who believed that ritual was always good, it was a benevolent force. Um, so Xunzi believed that portents or omens mean nothing. They do not predict disaster, and that we should instead look to kind of human behavior, such as corruption and kind of negligence, like particularly with regards to agriculture and stuff like that, to kind of predict human behavior. So he was a kind of an early scientist, really, or an advocate of kind of systems theory. He says, gentlemen regards portents as ornaments, but the common people regard them as supernatural. So he also was believed in meritocracy, and he believed that the fate of man lies in heaven, and that the fate of society lies in ritual. So again, putting the emphasis on ritual. He believed that the rites are markers. This was his belief. They rid the world of disorder. Without rites, man is blind. Okay, so training of man's desires is necessary because man is born evil. Um, Kind of like going back to Yao and the idea of the calendar that he brought in. It's kind of ritual is bound to the idea of the calendar, bound to that kind of extraordinary sense, uh, which is inextricably bound to human kind of behavior. It's something kind of which transcends human behavior as well, and is bound with the kind of the Tao and kind of the transcendental. Okay, so it's a Platonic higher form, and like Plato, he believed in temperance, and the technology, this Confucian technology of kind of ritual and order, were something which kind of were kind of man's salvation, really, and were inexorable parts of human behavior and man's condition. So some rituals include accepting death and burial customs. These have kind of totemic or symbolic functions. Um, he also believed that kind of rituals are about reverence, and he believed in kind of the mourning period, and influenced by people like Xunzi, was the kind of the 3-year mourning period in China for people who were suffered a death of a kind of an intimate, such as a parent, a spouse, or a child, or of an emperor. And then after that, things go back to normal. So it's kind of like, it's been called method mourning by people like Thomas Radesi. So it's kind of like scripted method acting, or a design for life, a kind of a performativity, what Judith Butler calls a performativity. Becoming a character, it teaches man how to live. That's what rituals do, and this has been talked about in kind of the postmodern era, and rites, according to Xunzi, are a source of joy, unity, fulfillment, simplicity, simplifying the human experience, and an elegant design for humans, for a way to live, a design for life. Okay, so there's a quote from Xunzi: the person attempting to travel 2 roads at once will get nowhere. So it's about simplicity, you know, and he continues to be relevant as a naturalist, believing that kind of, everything is natural and not supernatural. But it's controversial to kind of call him a naturalist outright, but you can call him a humanist, and humanism is to be distinguished from atheism, because in humanism, the human experience is positive. It's not defined with negative connotations like atheism, So Sun Tzu is an atheist, is a controversial belief. Like, he wasn't an outright atheist; he was a humanist, So he actually acknowledged a place or a space, a conceptual space for the supernatural. So he was a humanist. He was a holistic thinker. He was not an atheist per se. Okay, there's another quote from Xunzi. It says, "Not having heard something is not as good as having heard it. Having heard it is not as good as having seen it. Having seen it is not as good as knowing it. Knowing it is not as good as putting it into practice." So the superordinate actual propensity of um, ritual to kind of nourish and kind of charge um, human experience, to nourish human experience. So it's all about the philosophy of ritual, and he has influenced people like Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein said that kind of like the primitives, they know perfectly well what they're doing when they enact ritual. You know, the idea that kind of like um, their society is broken, or is an erroneous belief, because um, it's he believed that kind of like their beliefs, their seemingly primitive beliefs, serve a purpose, and that they are an apt fit to kind of their experience of reality. So Wittgenstein and Xunzi overlap regards their understanding of ritual. Okay. So there's another quote from Xunzi. "Man is born with a liking for profit." Okay, so he's a humanist. He's like Erasmus, or he's like kind of like these kind of humanistic thinkers, maybe perhaps Hobbesian, but that would be a bit in extremis to kind of categorize him as that. Um, he also talks about the problem of petitionary prayer. The idea that is it rational to pray to God? Will He answer prayer? And like he defends that postulation, that position. He defends it. Um, like a lot of modern religious thinkers, he doesn't see it as irrational. He sees kind of the superordinates of ritual, and he kind of he bears testimony to ritual and its importance. So there's just some final thoughts on Mensa versus Shunsa. Mensa believing that human nature is good, Shunsa believing that it's bad. Mensa believing that ritual shouldn't be emphasized, but Shunsa believing that it should be emphasized. So this is their kind of moral epistemology. The importance of ritual is something that is attenuated by Shunsa. And obviously the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas believing that, or engaging in human sacrifice, that could be an argument against kind of ritual, and ritual creating outgroups, social outgroups, the social order, like the Jew, that student, the witch, in Europe, the witch obviously being associated with the female, but in some parts of France, more males were burnt, or an equal number of males were burnt. Avignon, principality, an equal number of males were burnt. So it's important to remember that. So, differing views of human nature between these two seminal Chinese philosophers. And a text you can read is Xunzi, Basic Writings by Watson, 1963. Okay, so you can refer to that. I'll leave it there.